Today we're diving into the world of Cisco IP phones from the 2000s. We'll start with the iconic, in my opinion, 7960. This was the same style phone sitting on my desk when I started my first real job out of college. Its older brother, the 7965, and some very ridiculous Wi-Fi 7925 IP phones. We're going to get these things running on an early 2000s Cisco-only setup using a 2821 router and Cisco Call Manger Express. We'll begin to get this whole setup incorporated into what I'm calling the retro rack, cover all the basic configuration for these things, including firmware upgrades, and hopefully make some calls. Let's get into it. We're getting into IP phones. On the left, I've got two Cisco 7960s, and on the right, two Cisco 7965. And I know it can be confusing or very hard to follow or annoying when guys are just throwing out Cisco gear numbers, but Cisco was really proud that these were Cisco IP phones, and for once in their lives, they put the actual number of the device, right on the front. For example, here is a Cisco 2900 series router. They proudly display on the front that it is a Cisco 2900 series, but you've got to flip it around to the back to learn that it is a Cisco 2911 to be precise. There were several iterations in this 2900 series line. Not the case in the Cisco IP phone lineup. It doesn't say 7900 series, it tells you it's a 7960, and the other one's a 7965. Which I find kind of funny because these were meant to be in front of jokers like me that didn't know anything about the gear going on behind the scenes to power them, so why be so specific? So these are all phones, of course. You can pick it up, you've got a handset, dial a number, just like you'd expect. You've got a dial tone and all that. But they operate over the network, not a traditional analog telephone line. So in the late 90s, mostly early 2000s, real telephones, like this one, in enterprise situations anyway, were being replaced with these, and they operate over the network. They've got Ethernet ports on the back. This would come from the switch, the gear that's actually dealing with telephony, and you could pass data through to a PC. So you can see this one is labeled SW for switch, PC for PC. So the very typical setup would have been, you had the PC link going into your workstation on your desk, and then the switch link going off to the networking infrastructure for your enterprise that would hook these things up and let you talk over the phone and pass you data into your workstation. These Cisco 7960s have a special place in my heart, and I suspect a lot of other folks feel the same way, because I graduated from college in 2011, and a week later I started at a very large enterprise, and this exact phone, not this one, but this exact model was on my desk. We had offices back then, and this was before Slack, this was before Teams. And so the primary means of communication were in person, because we were in an office, of course, email, and then over the phone. So the way I would use this is I would pick it up, and there's this directory button, and then I could go find anyone. I think there was 8,000 people at the company when I was working there at the time. I'd call the guy down the hall, pick up the phone, and say, hey, you broke the build. How about you come to my office and we'll talk about it? And I'm pretty sure this particular phone that was on my desk in 2011 was dated by those standards, because you can tell just by the look of the screen, this one's clearly better. You can just kind of tell. Let's talk a little bit about how you actually power these things, or your options for doing so. We're bridging a little bit of a divide here between this older model and this newer model. I'm going to flip them both around and we'll look at the backs. This is the 7960, this is the 79 this is the 7965. On the back of the older model, we've got this 48 volt DC barrel jack in. We've also got this 10100 megabit switch in, which I was showing you earlier. This is the slightly newer one. We've got the same 48 volts DC in, and we've got 10100 1 gigabit in right here from the switch. And to make a long story short, I don't think any big, massive enterprise would have been using that 48 volt barrel jack DC in. They're not going to send that out with the phone to every desk. They're going to be using something called Power over Ethernet, which lets you plug a device in over its Ethernet cable to get data and also power. And this was standardized in the early 2000s. This one does not accept standard PoE. It accepts inline power, which is Cisco's earlier version of PoE that is proprietary to Cisco. And this one over here does not accept inline power. It accepts normal PoE. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We're going to power up all of these in turn. We'll start with the older ones here. I think these came out in 2003, the best I could tell. So yeah, by the time I had one of these on my desk, it was almost 10 years old already. But like I was saying, these can't accept normal or modern standardized PoE. They need inline power. Over in what I'm calling my retro rack, I've got a Cisco 3500XL switch, and it can deliver inline power. This cable here is connected up to that switch, so we'll put it in the port, maybe, labeled switch, and let's see what happens. Oh, that switch is not on. I'll be right back. Okay, the switch is on now. Critical piece of the puzzle. Yeah, so we see I got a green light here, and we'll give it a moment to boot up. Loading up this Universal Application Loader, copyright 2009, so that's probably roughly when it's from. And it says configuring VLAN, and it won't get much further than this because we don't actually have a network that understands these things. That will be later in the video. And now I'm actually curious. This is going to my modern rack with regular PoE. I can't remember all the standards that thing supports. I'm 99% sure this will not work, but so yeah, nothing. You need the Cisco inline power for this older 7960. Let's boot up the other one, see how it's doing. You can like factory reset these things. We'll probably have to, maybe we'll have to do that later. Yep, it's powering up, and it looks like it's in the same shape. Universal Application Loader 09. It's got one vertical dead pixel line. That's no big deal. Let's see what these 7965s are about. This is the inline power, and I don't think these can use that one. These need regular PoE. Right, nothing. Okay, so we'll get it on the modern PoE. Yeah, it comes right to life. These screens are way cooler, as you'll see. This one is attempting to talk to a router or the Cisco software that we'll go over later and trying to upgrade itself with new firmware, and it just kind of loops like this because it can't find a server. And it won't actually boot and just show the phone screen, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, it picked up an IP from my home network because it's plugged into my modern rack. I think that's the version of the firmware, maybe. Yeah, that's not going to do anything, so we'll unplug this one for now. And we'll plug in our last one here. Comes to life. Got the 07 copyright code, Java powered. Gotta love that. Give this a moment to boot up. And there it is. Says it's trying to configure an IP. It'll get one, but won't be able to use it as a phone or anything. And check out the screen. You can customize these wallpapers. We will definitely have to attempt doing that. So they're all working in that I can power them on. That's good. But we're going to need some sort of server, for lack of a better word, to host the IP telephony software and let these things actually act as phones and let us configure them remotely. And for that, we're going to use this Cisco 2821 router from around the same time period. We're going to host something called Call Manger Express, or CME. I'm going to call it CME a lot in this video. Another option is the Cisco Unified Communication Manager, or CUCM. That thing has to live on like a VM or an actual server rather than a router. The Express version lives on a router, and that's what we're going to try today. Both of those things have had like a million different names over the course of their lifespan, so it's insanely confusing to sort out what you're actually trying to accomplish here. And I'm also going all in and doing this with Cisco only gear. You can also use these phones with something like free PBX. I'll link to some pretty promising looking tutorials down in the description. That's how any normal home lab I think would set this up, but we're full enterprise down here. We're gonna go through the pain and try to do it with Cisco only gear. I chose this 2821 on purpose. This is sort of the last of the line of routers, I think, that can do this without special licensing. Cisco eventually introduced all this like complicated licensing crap you got to worry about and have the licenses on the router. This one, I just need to get the right version of the iOS software. iOS is the operating system these Cisco routers run, and hopefully it will be able to do the telephony stuff for the IP phones. But before we do that, I've got some more phones to show you. Look at these bad boys. These are Cisco 7925 IP phones. They're IP phones just like the big ones I was showing you, except they operate over Wi-Fi. And I think the combination of that router I was showing you and the software I've been looking into is going to be able to run these and the bigger phones. So there you go. You can configure this to get on a Wi-Fi network. That's going to be really interesting. It's a really good feeling phone. It's got kind of this like rubberized exterior. Feels good in your hand. Feels good to put it up to your ear. I'm excited to see if I can get these things working. We'll go over factory resetting them, and I don't know much about them yet, but getting them to work on Wi-Fi. We'll start with the bigger phones. But I've got one more thing to show you to complete our IP phone setup. This might be the most ridiculous thing I've ever bought. Let me take it out. It's also completely new in box. I don't think it's ever been used. It's a 6-port charging dock for these things. This is such a ridiculous thing to own. It's the Cisco Unified Wireless IP Phone 7925G multi-charger. And yeah, it's obviously super sweet. These things have really easy to remove batteries, and I haven't just realizing this. I think this is so you can plug a battery in. Yeah, you can just have hot spare batteries or something. This is so awesome. In the box we've got the charger. Let's plug it in real quick. Pretty serious power supply at that. It's got this green light when you plug it in. Oh, sorry about this black stuff on my fingernail. I was over at my mom's house earlier today and we had a leak in the roof. Water dripping into her microwave. So I gave it the old homeowner special. Got it all gooped up. It's supposed to absolutely dump rain tonight. So I'm hoping I hear good news from her about no more water intrusion. Oh, and all the roofing experts, I know. The flange is supposed to be under the shingles. The guys that installed that said the shingles were too brittle, so they put it on top. And it made it 3 years, so hopefully I can get 3 more with my tar job there. But that's not why you're here. I'm getting sidetracked. Let's see if this thing works. Oh yeah. Screen comes on. Yep. Little charging indicator. See if the battery slots work. Yes. This thing is so good. All right, that's the phone setup. Got a few wireless IP phones, got 4 of these. We'll try to get everything working today. I'm going to clear all this off. We'll get that router back on the bench and start messing with the software to see if we can't get these things working. I fired this thing up the other night, and I don't think it has the version of the iOS software we're going to need for telephones, so we're going to have to put a new version of iOS on here. It's one of these units where all the cables and stuff, even power, are coming off the front. Don't know how I feel about that. Stores its configuration on this little 256 megabyte compact flash card. So hopefully that's big enough for our purposes today. Let's power this on and I'll show you what it's running currently. It's booting up. I think this thing came out in 2004, so it's kind of the right time period for the phones. It's got a really nice feature, that loud noise I was showing you when it booted up without noise canceling. It revs itself down when it's not under load after it realizes, you know, everything's fine and temperatures are good. So it's actually quite quiet when it's just operating next to me. And here it goes. I think we're getting in. Let's issue a show version to see what this thing is running. And it looks like it's running this Advantage Enterprise K9 and version 12.4 of the iOS software. I don't know if that has the telephony stuff. It is apparently from 2008 is when that was compiled. There's this thing called telephony-service, which lets you deal with these IP phones. Oh, maybe it is running it. Show telephony-service. Telephony-service is not enabled. Maybe we need to enable it. This is going a little smoother so far than I thought it would. Let's get into global configuration mode and let's see if we can configure telephony service. And we can. You can see it says config telephony. I've only done some light research on what I need to do in here, but this is really good news. I think we're just going to try it with Cisco iOS 12.4 from 2008. This is all very era appropriate, but I think what we're going to do is actually get this incorporated into the retro rack. I want to move this router in there. It'll be yet another router. The main router is that large VXR, but unfortunately I don't think it can do this telephony stuff I need to do with these newer IP phones, newer than that VXR anyway. I've got it sitting in the bottom of the rack temporarily on top of some machines. I've got power going in, a console port, so that we can control it over the CLI like you were just seeing. And then on the back, I've got a network cable plugged in. That network cable is flowing up to here into this aggregation switch so that it can participate in the network that this big other router is hosting. a 10.0 network. And the topology here is that this thing hands out IP addresses. It's a DHCP server, and the phones need IP addresses. So as the phones come online, this thing will still be responsible for giving them an address, something like 10.00, 107, 108, and so on. But our friend way down here is going to be responsible for handling all the VoIP stuff because the big router can't. So it's going to participate on this network, and eventually we're going to rack it up here. I think that's where I want it. I'm going to put one of these PDUs, power distribution units, another one I have right here. That's why there's this space here. This guy can actually do like dial-up ISP stuff, so you can dial in with a modem over a phone line and stuff. Well, it's not actually incorporated into the network down below yet, though. That'll be a future video. So we're going to rack that guy up here once I'm happy and it's working, it's configured. And later on, we're going to actually reconfigure all of this. I'm going to move some stuff around. I'm going to swap these switches. I'm waiting on some parts. Hopefully that is included in this video. But this is that inline power switch. So this thing can actually deliver inline power to those older phones. So they'll be hooked up to this guy for sure. So let's go see if we can configure this guy from the other room and everything's networked up correctly. And then we'll do a bunch of research on how to actually turn on that telephony stuff properly. I've got something called a terminal server in that rack. It was one of the units in that rack. And if you remember the blue console port I was plugging in locally here in the room, it basically just has a bunch of those, and I can remotely access a console session over the network. So this should get us to the router we were just messing with. And it is. That thing's called router. I'm going to rename this, and we're going to give it an IP on the network, a static IP. Let me talk through that. That network is getting so large that I'm starting to document the IPs and names of the items in the rack as I'm adding to it. We're going to give that thing an IP of 10.0.0.6, and I'm going to call it phone router 1. So let's do that right now. We're going to get into privilege mode. We're going to configure from terminal. This is global configuration mode. We'll give it a host name of phone router 1. And you can see the prompt has changed on the bottom left there. Now when I'm consoled into this thing, I'll know exactly which one I'm dealing with. And then we're going to do a show IP int brief. And yeah, I've already played around with this in the past. This is that network interface that I have plugged into the switch for now. We need to assign that 10.0.0.6. So we'll do conf t int gigabit 00. We will give it an IP address of 10.0.0.6. Okay. Right away, I'm going to write out my changes so that I don't forget to do that later. As you're configuring a Cisco machine, the configuration is immediately live, but if you reboot the router, it will go away unless you save your changes, and that's what I just did there. We should be able to now ping something else on the network. You know, or not. I'm actually noticing it's saying that the protocol is down. That means the line is not plugged in or something. I'm gonna go take a look at what I did in there. I had the cable plugged into the wrong port. In this picture, maybe you can just barely see it. That one is gigabit 01. I had been configuring gigabit 00. So I just put that cable over to the other one. And right away, the line protocol came up. Let's try to ping the other equipment. Yeah, now we're fine. Let's figure out how to configure telephony service. I think I have a handle on how I'm going to configure these things, but it's not going to make a lot of sense over the CLI unless we talk a little bit about what these things actually do when they boot up. When we plug the cable in on the back, the first thing it's going to do is go look for a DHCP server. That's the VXR in the other room. The VXR is going to hand it an IP address, something like 10.0.0.108 or something like that. DHCP servers can also hand back metadata about the network. These things are looking for DHCP option 150. That is just a number key value pair that tells this thing, hey, where is my telephony server? We are going to configure that VXR to send back an IP and option 150 that says your telephony server is the router we were just looking at, the 2821. It's at 10.0.0.6. Once that's established, this thing will have an IP. It'll know that the server running CME, the telephony stuff this thing's looking for, is on 2821. The typical flow is that you'd have all the firmwares for your phones on the 2821 on your telephony server, and it would actually download a firmware, reload itself with the new software, and boot up. We'll probably have to tackle that, but for now, I'm just going to hope that the firmware that's already on this phone is compatible with my setup. So again, after we configure everything on the command line, and you actually give these things numbers on the command line, it's all remote. You give everything this thing needs to know, its extension. We're going to call this 101 or something, meaning that when we have multiple phones, you would dial 101 to call this one. It'll talk to the VXR, get an IP, learn that it should be talking to the 2821 phone router 1 for all the telephony stuff. This is all theoretical. I haven't tried it yet. Well, let's go do all that configuration on the command line, and then we'll plug this thing in. Let's do the easy part first. Here we are on the VXR. This is the DHCP server. It's called HQ router. And if we take a look at its configuration, it's got an existing IP DHCP pool called RetroRack. This is what's handing out those 10.0 addresses. What we're going to do is come in here and configure that pool. We're going to tell it, you need to send back option 150 as 10.006. Now, when a phone connects, the VXR is going to send back this value. It's going to say 150, which the phone is looking for. It's just somewhat arbitrary number, I think. And it's going to say, go talk to the phone router that actually knows how to do the telephony stuff. So that part is done. Now we're back on phone router 1, the 2821 that's sitting in the bottom of the rack that's going to do all the telephony stuff. And we're going to get in here and configure the telephony service, and I am totally out of my element. I've never done this before. This will be interesting. The first thing we're going to do is tell it how many phones it's allowed to have. That is max ePhones. That's a configuration setting. If we do question mark, it'll tell us a little bit more about that. This particular router, for whatever reason, can support 58 phones. In the CLI, Cisco calls them ePhones. ePhones are just those phones I was showing you. So we'll put that at the maximum. Then we're going to do this max DN command. And DN stands for directory numbers. In their basic use case, they're just the number on the phone. So like phone number 101, 102, 103, that's probably how I'm going to number them, just so it's easy to remember. And you can use these for more sophisticated things. Like you could have a directory number that you call that's maybe like a mailbox or something, I'm not sure. You can also have one that you call that like blasts out and pages all the other phones on the network. Plenty to explore in the future. I'm just going to say this router is allowed to have 192 of them. Then we're going to enter this IP source address command, and we're going to set it to ourselves. I think this is just letting the phones know they should talk to this thing over port 2000. See the CNF file thing? If we do create CNF files, I think it already did it for us. Look at this. I guess this takes a while. So in the background, it's creating a bunch of configuration files that the phones are going to read and look at and everything. Yeah, it just finished. Interesting. And I tried to tell it to do that again, and it says, please reissue this command later. I like that. That's nice. So I think that's fine. Now we're going to set up the actual phone. So we'll do ePhone directory number 1. This is our first phone we're going to set up, the one I was showing you on the bench over there. And we're just going to give it a number. It's going to be phone number 101. So we've set up the directory number, but we haven't set up the actual phone configuration. To do that, we do ePhone 1. You actually manually configure each phone. There's probably automated ways, but this is how I'm going to do it. It is a type 7960. We have to tell it about that. Oh, getting a little ahead of myself. We need to tell it the MAC address of the phone, which is a unique hardware identifier for any item on a network. Let's go look at that real quick. We're going to flip this phone over, and it should have a sticker with its MAC address for us to take a look at. And yep, there it is. So we're going to go enter that in the CLI as ePhone 1, and that's how the software knows that it should send particular configuration to this exact phone when it comes online. Got the phone here, so I'm going to put its MAC address in, just like that, hopefully. And now we will tell it to type 7960, and hopefully it'll let us. Yep. And this is kind of weird. Button 1. The phones have these buttons on the front, and I think maybe it's required or maybe it's just tradition or something. The first button is the number of this phone. And so it'll display that there, and that's what this button 1 thing means. The one on the right side, so button 1 is this one, and 1 is ePhone 1. It's kind of confusing. Might make more sense when we do a couple more. So because I just configured a phone, I'm going to do that create CNF files thing again. And it's off doing that, I think. I'll wait till it tells me it's done. It's complaining that clock is not set or synchronized. I don't think I care about that. That's probably like telling the time to the phone. See what happens when we boot it up. So I'm going to save my changes just in case I need to reboot that thing or something. Let's plug this in. I am not particularly hopeful. I'm skipping a bunch of steps, putting the firmware on the router that this phone needs. I'm just sort of hoping that whatever's already on there is compatible. So we might have a little work to do. It says it's configuring VLAN. We might also have to like factory reset this thing. I really don't know. The screen has changed, but it's not good. So it's still just configuring VLAN, and up here you can see it says SIP SIP. There are different protocols these phones can use to connect with the telephony service. I'm trying to use the Cisco proprietary one called SCCP. SIP is actually good if you're using, free PBX or Asterisk or something. This is probably actually the preferable firmware to have on here. I don't think that's gonna work with my setup right now. Let's plug in the other one. Oh, and like its old configuration is like slowly coming back. See, it says kitchen. So this used to be in a kitchen, apparently. I'm gonna let it sit here for a while, actually, and I'll be back. Yeah, this is pretty funny. So it's all booted up now, and it used to be kitchen, and its extension was 202. Yeah, let's try the other one, though they came from the same place, so probably not gonna make a difference. These 4 phones were actually donated by a really generous viewer named Oliver. Oh man, this one's weird. I have to like get a tool in there to get the cable out. Just that phone. So that's why I was saying it's probably not going to make a difference, because if they were SIP on their net, the old network, they're probably still SIP. But let's find out. And a huge thanks to them for hooking me up with this stuff. Also, this obviously isn't going to work because it has a different MAC address. I'm going to go change that real quick and reboot it. That one's rebooting. And one thing that is concerning me is I don't actually see them reaching out to get an IP address from the router. I would think whether they're using that SIP protocol or SCCP, also known as Skinny in the Cisco world, I would expect they would at least try to grab an IP. I don't know. This other one finished booting up, and it actually says protocol application invalid, which is actually kind of encouraging because I think that's the state I'm in, that SIP versus Skinny thing. Let's do a factory reset just for fun. I don't think it's going to make a difference because the firmware on the phone is actually determining the protocol. And to do this, you reboot it and immediately hold pound. Reset key sequence detected, and then you do all the numbers in sequence, I think. And save network config. I'm going to say no. Okay, factory reset initiated. That was pretty simple. Again, I don't think this is going to make any difference, but you never know. Yeah, same thing. No surprise there. Just for fun, let's try one of the newer phones. And I'm going to need to use a PoE injector because that switch in the other room can only do inline power, not the PoE that these are expecting. So we've got LAN in. This is coming from the switch. And then this little guy will hopefully inject the right power that this thing wants. We will find out. Yeah, booting up. Now again, I'm guessing these came from kind of the same deployment, so I'm not expecting this to work, but find out. It's trying to upgrade. Let's see if it grabs an IP. That would be nice. It's not going to be able to upgrade because I don't have any firmware hosted on the router at the moment. It is very rapidly looking like we're going to have to deal with that. It'd be really nice to see this thing grab an IP properly. It flashed very briefly and it grabbed 10.00.108. So it talked to the network and then it reset itself, probably because the router doesn't have any firmware it needs. And I did not configure this thing at all, so the router's probably going to reject it. This is rapidly becoming very complicated. A few minutes later, and I think it's about to do something. Oh, it's just restarting. Okay, what we're going to do is I'm going to go take this MAC address and put it in our config, like I was before, and see if this thing likes the router. Starting to get a new appreciation for all the IT guys that had to configure these things as new hires showed up at very large enterprises. That's the MAC address of that guy, and I think I'm going to do a create. I don't actually know if this is necessary, but I'm going to tell it to create those configuration files again. I also don't know if I need to like reset the router whenever I'm doing this or whatever. We'll find out. It's rebooting. I hope that's making sense that I'm actually changing my one configured ePhone to the MAC address of each phone I'm messing with. Otherwise, I don't think the telephony service server is going to respond or do anything for this guy. There, you could barely see it has a 108 IP. Yeah, I don't think this is going to do anything. Okay, I hunted down the firmware files for the new ones and the old ones. Cisco used to just host them and you could download them, but it's a little tricky to find them these days, but they are out there. And I'm in a situation, whatever ancient version of CME I'm hosting right now is not compatible with the newer phone firmware I found. So we're going to set these aside for the moment and return our focus to these guys. And you can see I've started labeling them with their extension number because I was very quickly losing track of which phone I was messing with. And I'm going to make ePhone entries for all of them so that I don't have to keep changing the MAC address all the time. I found firmware for this one that is compatible with the CME we're running right now. Let's go through the process of getting that on the router and see if that gets us anywhere. I found a copy of the firmware for those 7960s, the older phone that we're concerning ourselves with now. And you can see right here, it says it's the SCCP version of the firmware. That is the protocol we want on this all Cisco setup. Basically, we're going to copy all of these files that it needs over to something called a TFTP server. And then we're going to copy all of those onto the router, and we'll do some configuration so that when one of those older 7960s shows up, they will try to load this firmware onto themselves, and hopefully that gets us somewhere. Okay, step one. This is a VM running in my modern rack in Proxmox. It is on the same network as the retro rack, and I've got this 7960 folder, and I've got all the files we need in here. Back on phone router 1, where we're hosting our telephony service, we're going to copy all those files. So that server I was just showing you, that VM is at 10.00.101. I have that folder, and I'm going to copy every file for the firmware to the flash. That is that compact flash card I was showing you earlier. And you go like this. And there it goes. I copied the first file. I'm going to do that for all the other ones, and I'll be right back. Just finished all that, and if we do a dir flash, the contents of that flash card, we can see I've got a bunch of these different firmware files that I copied over, which should be compatible with those older phones. Now we need to tell the telephony service to inform the phone that it should load this firmware. We'll get into global configuration. We'll configure the telephony service, and we're going to issue a load command for the phone type, 7960, and the name of that firmware. You can see it's up here. They've got a bunch of different extensions. I'm not sure what each one does. And it updated the CNF files automatically. Again, those are the configuration files for all the phones. The CNF files I keep talking about are, of course, XML files. And I was starting to get suspicious about whether I'm even generating them. And there's this show telephony service TFTP bindings. If we issue that, all these XML files, and we see some about 7960. So I think we're okay. This router is also operating as a TFTP server. TFTP stands for Trivial File Transfer Protocol. And basically it's a way for different systems to move files back and forth. We just TFTP'd some stuff over to the router. The phones actually use TFTP to get config files and the firmware onto themselves. With all that configured, theoretically, we plug this one in and it should download the SCCP firmware and be online. But, you know, not holding my breath there. That's weird. There we go. Let's plug it in and see what we get. I'm sort of nervous because I never saw these older ones actually try to reach out and grab an IP. It's like they're not even getting that far. That's like the first step. So let's see what happens. Another issue might be, you see it saying configuring VLAN. I'm just throwing all of my phones and my data and everything on one network. Usually you would use something called a virtual LAN, a VLAN, which allows multiple networks to travel over one physical cable, and you would separate your voice and your data traffic, so like your computers. I'm not doing that here, and I also have the complication of, I'm dealing with two routers. The simple configuration would be your telephony service router is also your DHCP server. So we might be bringing that thing back in here and doing a very local lab setup right on the bench to get the retro rack out of the equation if we can't get this to work. Ooh, okay. Progress. It was just saying that it was requesting configuration and the TFTP file is not found. This means it actually tried, I think, to go talk to our server. Let me look around a little bit. That's different behavior. I like that. We are so close. I'm going to turn on this debug TFTP events command, and then we're going to go restart the phone. Just rebooted the phone. This debug TFTP events thing on phone router 1, it's going to show us all the activity from devices coming in and trying to talk to the TFTP server it's hosting. And we should see things like the phone trying to grab files and stuff like that. Yeah, there we go. So it's looking for certain files. It's looking for the firmware we just tried to give it. And now it says TFTP file not found. This is a configuration file. This is the MAC address of that phone. What's really suspicious is that it's looking for this SBIN, which definitely exists. Dir flash. Yeah, this thing right here is on the flash card. That is weird. We are so close, I think. Been messing around for a while. I told my wife I was gonna come to bed a long time ago. These phones will get you, guys. We're gonna do a show telephony service TFTP bindings. This is all the files that this thing thinks it's hosting for the phones. And I don't see our firmware anywhere. Remember, if we do dir flash, it's a file that looks like this POO, whatever. Those are not being hosted by the TFTP server, so that makes sense that the phone is complaining it can't find it there. We might need to tell the router to host those files specifically on the TFTP server. So TFTP server and then the file name. I'm going to do that for all the firmware files we need. And then we're going to take a look at the TFTP bindings again. I'm not seeing it. We'll see what happens anyway. Ooh, something's happening. I looked over at the phone and it said something about successful upgrade or something, so maybe we're in. Gotta kind of put it on this angle. These have a ridiculous glare on them. Sorry about that. Come on, baby. Ooh, it says verifying load. Upgrading. Oh man. We're gonna brick this thing? What do you think? Haven't seen this UI before. This part where it reboots and tries to go find the network takes, I don't know, 30, 40 seconds, but it feels like an eternity. We did it. Remember, we set this thing as extension 101, button 1. I don't know, is that by tradition or what's the story with that convention? That's this phone. We have a dial tone. Oh man, yeah, okay. Let's set this one up as 102 and see if we can make a call. This is wild. I'm gonna have to go to bed after this, otherwise I'm gonna be up all night messing with these stupid phones. So we already have ePhone 1 configured. That's the phone that just booted up. And then we need to make an ePhone directory number for the second phone. I'm just refreshing my memory by looking at the config. So I think we do conft telephony. Let's do ePhone directory number 2. We're gonna give it 102. And then we're gonna set up ePhone 2 and the MAC address, which I have right here. I'll plug that in. And there we go. It's also a type 7960. And this is a little odd, but its first button is going to be itself, and it's assigned to directory number 2. I don't know who invented all that. This is another line going back to the retro rack, that inline power switch. Maybe. Oh, it fell out. This one is really weird. Yeah, there it goes. Booting up. It's verifying load. I didn't catch this earlier. Upgrading loader. Doing all sorts of stuff. So yeah, I think it's going to work. It's taking the firmware. Now I think it's going to reboot and yeah, should load the new firmware. It finished. It claims it's 102. It's got dial tone. Is this just going to work? I'm going to try to call 102 from over here. Oh, that was loud. Let's turn that. Wow. Okay, well, it works. I'm in shock. That was really loud. Let's get into the settings over here before I try calling it. I don't know. Let's do it anyway. 101. Oh yeah. Hello? Why can't I pick up answer? Hello? Yes. We have a call. I'm still in shock. Okay. These are working, but we've got more work to do. I need to upgrade iOS on that router so that hopefully we can support the 7965s. And of course, these bad boys. This stuff won't work in the current setup, but I'm still thrilled. Massive progress tonight. Okay, let's revisit this tomorrow. Oh, and don't worry, it's not actually 3:42 a.m. The clock on the router is wrong, so the clock on the phones is wrong. It's the next evening, and I'm getting back at this. And like I was saying, the versions of the firmware I have for all the phones, the combination of all that is only going to work with a newer version of iOS running on this router. And this thing is running a pretty old version, so you can do a show version. It's running 12.4, which is probably from 2008, based on the compilation date right there. And I think if we do show telephony service, this version 4.3 of CME is quite old. So we're going to upgrade to iOS 15.0 or .1 or something. I'll show you the bin in a minute. And that's going to have a much newer version of CME on it, I hope. and we'll be able to run all these phones. My understanding with this router is I should have the 256 megabyte compact flash card, and you saw earlier I do. And let's do a dir flash to see how much space we've got. The bins are like 60 megabytes, I think. I've got this many bytes free, which is 84 megabytes. So we should be okay. We'll be able to get rid of some of this stuff. I've got like other versions on here that I don't think I need. The other issue is we need to make sure I have enough RAM. And the recommendation I was reading online is 512 megabytes. I think if we do that show version thing again, we might be able to find how much RAM we've got. And I think what this is trying to tell us is I have 512 megabytes. So I think we're okay. Back on my TFTP server, let's take a look. I've got this copy of iOS 15 with this Advantage Enterprise package of features we need for the telephony stuff, I think. And it is compatible with our 2800 here. We're going to copy this over to the router. Back on the router, I did a show version, and it's showing us exactly the version of iOS that it's running. It says system image file is this whole thing. Just to be extra safe, I'm actually going to back that up to my FTP server in case I need to redo everything here. So to get that backed up, we're going to do copy flash that file name over to the TFTP server, which I think is right here. Let's see if that works. This might take a moment. All done. That took 92 seconds. If we come back to the TFTP server, we still have 3 files because I'm pretty sure I already had it on here, but now we're doubly backed up. You get a little Cisco iOS tutorial here. Let's do a dir flash to see if our new guy is here, and it is. This is the new one that we're going to want. Now we need to tell the router to point at that when it loads up, and it'll load that iOS config. You know what? Actually, we're going to copy my startup config over to the TFTP server as well, because that would be a good idea. Now, if I hose completely everything, I can factory reset the router, copy all the configuration we've done throughout the video and the old version of iOS that I know is working back to the router, and we can kind of start over. But let's get into global configuration mode, and we're going to do boot system flash and then the new bin. And now we're going to write that config out, and we're going to reload the router and see if it likes this version of iOS. It's booting up now. And it's possible that because I'm jumping so many iOS versions, some of those commands we put in are not the same anymore. So it might complain. I'm guessing it's going to complain about some of those ePhone commands. But it's also possible none of that has changed at all. So I guess we'll find out, and I'll stop yapping. I did something wrong because it is pointing at version 12.4 still. Okay, I'll be back. I got to do a little more research. I was doing that from memory. It's still booting into the old one. This thing is slow compared to other stuff I've messed with. I wonder if upgrading is going to do us any favors in that regard. I doubt it. I have a theory about what happened. Let's do show running config. Aha. This has tripped me up before. I have 2 entries. I don't know what this is. This is for a different router. I didn't do that. I'm going to remove both of these. Did I copy the wrong one? I bet I copied the wrong one. We're going to negate those. So I'm going to say no boot system flash, the old one. And I'm going to remove the other one as well. So I'm just saying no, and then that boot command. And now if we take a look, we don't have any iOS image configured. Let's try that again. Dir flash. We want, what is this? What is this C7200 thing? That's not what I want. It's like this didn't even copy over. Okay, I'm just going to leave all that in. Clearly I was confused. I just cleaned up the flash directory. There was the previous owner had a bunch of stuff from 3 or 4 years ago for a different platform, as far as I could tell. So now all that's in there is the old iOS version we were running in our firmware files. Well, let's copy the bin over, for real this time. This can take a while. Okay, so now that I've pulled my head out of my ass and actually copied over the iOS version we need, here is the contents of our dir flash. This is the one we're currently running, iOS 12.4, and we're going to try to get it to run this iOS 15.0. So of course, go into comp T, we're going to say boot system, and then the path to that file. And then I think if we do a show running config, we can see that is the boot file we just set. I'm going to write that out to my configuration. And now we will reload the router and hopefully it works. And there we go. It's attempting to boot into iOS 15.0 this time, which was apparently compiled in 2013. It's coming up, and it's definitely slower than before. It takes a while. But I see the phones over there. They're trying to register, so they might just come back online here. And to be fair, you're not really meant to be rebooting these things all the time. They're meant to be up, 24/7 for years at a time or whatever. So, and the phones came right back to life, and they are fully functional. So that is awesome. I'm going to copy the firmware for these over to the flash, and we'll try to config line 103. Finished getting all the 7965 firmware files over, so you see in my flash directory I've got a bunch more stuff now related to those phones. And we need to actually, what version of CME are we running? 7.1. Hopefully that's new enough for the Wi-Fi phones. We'll find out. So let's get in there and configure it. And remember, we need to tell this thing what to do when a 7965 tries to talk to it. And we're going to tell it to load that new firmware I just put on there. And then I'm going to do that thing where I tell the TFTP server to host all the flash files because that wasn't working before. Okay, and then we're going to make the directory number 3. It's going to be number 103. We need to configure ePhone 3. And I need to go get the MAC address. And we need to tell it it is a type 7965. I think that's it. Oh, I was just looking at my config. I need to do that button thing. Button 1. I guess I should have tried it without it. Maybe it's not necessary. Let's go plug that phone in. Let's see if we get lucky. Will it work? It's trying to find an IP and do its little upgrade. It got an IP, and you can see it is actively downloading the firmware. This is very promising. This one's pretty nice. It tells you what file and how much progress it's had. It tells you that it's going to download 5 files and how many it's gone through. Pretty sweet. It just rebooted itself. It rebooted itself 2 more times, and now it's upgrading again. That doesn't seem right. Yeah, it gets to here. Totally wrong date and time. So it's not picking that up from the router. It said registering briefly. Now the screen is black and this is illuminated. The screen is just black, but the router spit out an info log that it had successfully registered. Just go press that button. What's this thing doing? Oh. Yeah, what the heck was that? There we go, 103. That whole process was quite a bit jankier than these. Took a few reboots and then that weird blank screen thing. I have a dial tone. Let's call 103. Yeah, we have a phone call. Okay, we did it. It's always surprising once it works. There's kind of this sense of, it's not even relief, you're just kind of like empty inside. You're like, wow, that was it. I'm not even going to worry about this one. I'll just leave a spot registered for it as 104. I don't have enough lines coming in here anyway to hook everything up at once. And we'll have future videos where we kind of arrange these around the vicinity down here in the basement, and we'll get a little setup going. Let's see if we can get these Wi-Fi ones to work. In a previous video, I covered some Cisco AeroNet gear from the early 2000s, and I actually have one of those access points running on the RetroRack network and handing out IPs. So the deal with these things is they're just like the other IP phones, except they work over Wi-Fi and not over a wired Ethernet cable, of course. I've already factory reset this one, and I've labeled it for myself as line 105. I've got the firmware on the router. I've configured line 105. You guys have seen me do all that before, so I'll spare you. But I haven't powered this up yet. It is actually configured to connect itself to the Collab Retro Wi-Fi network that the rack is hosting. And I think if we boot this up, it's just going to start working. I haven't tried it yet. I set up that Wi-Fi before I had the router set up. But when you get one of these things, it's got a bunch of options. So we can come in here to network profiles and view the default one, go down to WLAN, and you see it's got a default SSID of Cisco, and I can't do anything about it. Well, I figured out you do **#, and you can see it says settings unlocked, and then you can actually get in there and configure things. So that's how you can like unlock the settings and get it on your Wi-Fi network. And if you're of a certain age, you'll like this. You actually use T9, which actually comes back very quickly. I must say. Pretty fun to use that again. So let's boot this one up and see if it gets connected. Again, I know this will connect to the Wi-Fi, but none of that phone configuration stuff was there before, so let's see how it does. Locating network services, configuring IP. It's doing something. It's registering. It just flashed the IP address of the CME server. Oh man, that was so fast. I don't think this needed to reload. It's firmware. We're going to call line 101. Dial. Come on. That is obviously not working. This was one thing I was actually kind of worried about. I think the Wi-Fi access point you use might be a little picky. Obviously it is configured though. Call canceled. Let's try calling it. Busy signal. All right, I'm gonna go mess around with the configuration. We're pretty close though, because it configured itself with the router. I think it might be that button thing I keep asking about and not testing. So button 1 is directory number 5. And now that we've made changes, I think we can remotely tell the phones to reset themselves. Let's see. What is it doing? Yeah, it just rebooted. That's cool. So I can remotely make configuration changes on the phones, tell them all to reset and pull the new configuration. Let's see if this worked. It briefly flashed firmware update failed. That can't be good. You can see all of them are going off and resetting now. We have a slight improvement. It's ringing. It won't let me answer it. What? Okay, we're getting somewhere. But I can't call this phone. 101. It just goes call in progress. Oh, we're so close. I figured it out. In the configuration for this, I had to force the security settings to completely off, none. And check this out. I'm going to dial 103. Call is completely connected. We can go the other way. I can answer now. Let's put this on speaker. And you can hear me with some feedback, but it's working. Yes. One last test. One more IP phone, I guess. Okay, I've got this other one configured as 106, and it also like broke when I took the battery out, so that's too bad. So we'll get in here to network profiles, WLAN ** to unlock that. We'll set that to my Collab Retro Wi-Fi network. It's so funny how fast T9 comes back. It's not even that bad. Let's see if it just tries to connect. Connection failed. Open security, that's all fine. There it goes, it's connecting. Image download failed. So these are like, yeah, firmware update failed. So I don't have the firmware updating quite right on these things, but I'm getting lucky. I think they clearly already have a firmware on them that works with my setup. Okay. I'm gonna call 105. Oh, come on. Call 106 from here. That works. I can't answer it though. I'll go check my config. The config looks right. It's identical to this one, except it's, ePhone 6, number 106. I'm gonna reset it remotely. There it goes. That is really cool. That's a cool feature. Earlier I reset all of them, but you can reset an individual phone. So you can see this one's still on. It thinks it's back. There it goes. All right. We have a connected phone call. Yes. So I just needed to reset it. Let's call the other way. I can pick it up now. Yep. Wow. One last test for 106 here. No surprise there. Wow. We've done it. All 3 style of phone are working great. Tons of progress. We got all 3 types of phone working, but we have a lot more work to do. These Wi-Fi version phones don't work very well. It's actually a small miracle I caught them working fully and completely on camera, actually. I've been playing with them for a couple hours, and it's very hard to actually get them to work consistently. Almost always you'll be able to call them with one of these, but you can't pick up, and they can't call each other. Then you reset them a bunch of times, and sometimes it'll work, like I caught on camera, which was amazing. I think there's a few issues going on. These have a newer version of the firmware that I'm hosting on the router than what I could find. So that might be why they fail to update. I also think they're just a little too new for the version of iOS I put on that router. So in an upcoming video where we're going to do a part 2 on all the IP phone stuff, the first port of call will be upgrading that router yet again to another version of iOS. It's running CME 7.1 right now. I'd like to get up into CME 8 or 9 maybe, and then maybe we'll have better luck with these Wi-Fi ones. These guys work great. No problem with those. And right out of the gate, of course, I could have just put the newest version of iOS I could find that router supports, but I don't really like doing it that way when I'm playing around and experimenting. I like to see like the oldest version of the software I can get working. I was also starting to get worried of the matrix of stuff I have here, so I'm worried that if I upgrade too far, this one won't work. I don't know if that's a legit concern or not. But anyway, we're going to throw a newer version of iOS on there until maybe we can get these working consistently. It could also be the access point I'm using. I'm using these really old Cisco Aeronet 350 series. I'd like to keep using them, and you saw we could make calls, so I think we've just got some finicky firmware mismatch going on with the router and these phones. This is a bridge, so it actually extends the Wi-Fi network over to here, and just for fun, I'd like to give this a permanent spot in this room, so I'll incorporate that in the video, the little install of this. We haven't even scratched the surface of what you can do with these phones. So of course you can change the wallpaper, you can change all the speed dial buttons, you can set up different ringtones, you can set up hold music, all sorts of stuff to dive into with these phones in a future video. As part of that, I'll also do a little bit of an infrastructure upgrade. So in the retro rack, I've got the power switch, the inline power switch in the middle, as sort of what I'm calling my main switch, which doesn't really make sense. So we'll swap places with the one underneath it, we'll get a bigger patch panel in there, rearrange stuff, and that'll be part of that video as well. I also need to mention that over the past year or so in the YouTube comments, Discord, on email, a lot of people have reached out to me about messing around with these IP phones, how to set them up, what all the options were, more than I can even count. So if you're one of those people, you know who you are. It definitely helped make this video possible. I'll also be at VCF Southwest on June 21st next month. That's a Saturday. So if you see me, definitely say hi. And if you're lucky, I might still have a sticker left for you. These phones are actually pretty fun to mess around with, especially when you get it working. I kind of had a feeling it was going to be a little bit of a slog, but once you kind of get one working, you get a feel for it and it gets a little easier, and that was indeed the case. If you'd like to support the channel and you haven't already, please do subscribe, and I've also got a Patreon where I post early release videos, behind the scenes, that sort of thing. Hopefully this was fun to follow along and watch me stumble through this. We've got a lot of success sitting on the bench here with these working phones. I'll see you in the next video.